Oops, it's recording. Está in English. I'm in English. I got me. Oh, look, it's really dark. Really dark. Oh, look, it's really dark, man. Oh, it's silly. I'm just quickly reminder of the sport or something in Australia. Um, I'm shaking my head, anything goes together. Debate, opinions, whatever. All sexy girls, sexy men. Look, the sport is going back on or something soon, like in another 3 weeks or a month or something. The sport or something. How can they have the sport back on when it's coronavirus? China created coronavirus, and economically, everything economically. How can they economically, Earth, like say you need a job, you need money. How do you live without no money? And how do you think God, the creator of Earth, is thinking this second? Reply on the bottom. Okay, because I'm fucking it up to debate opinions, so anything goes together. I do what I can, how I can, from little, for nothing, to do something beautiful. I love you. Goodbye. And reply why economically money is needed, and why economically we need to play sport. Why is it all important? Are we healthy? Are we not healthy? What is healthy? Who is healthy? Beautifully. No international computer network databases, everything. Reply on the bottom. This is going dark. Now it's dark, really dark now, man. I don't know why. 1 minute 40. I'm gonna cut it. I'm sorry. It's really. Look, me telly is the only. I haven't got it. The light blew up. I'm sorry, mate. Please reply. Do your best. And I'm talking in English. And do anything. Reply to me, please. Be nice. I love you. Thank you.
Like. and so yeah, end of 2018 is this dark, and what I mean though is like personally, right, like that stuff. And you experienced this too, Jonathan. It wasn't like we were always that happy-go-lucky. I think things got very personal. Because especially, and I think also like for you and I, we're relatively younger, but for other individuals who I think like there was more skin in the game. Certainly Andrew Yang, the Canada's the best. Like that stress is I can't even fathom, right? Like I can approximate it because I'm the only person who saw the books,
right?
And I'm cutting all the checks and I'm doing all the work, right? Because there's no one else to do it. No one else knows this thing,
right?
But that was like end of 2018, and so that it's not a particularly happy time in my life. I don't miss the end of 2018. Similarly, I do not miss the end of 2019. Like I said, I hope I'm like kind of picking up, but again, I appreciate you giving me the space where. The end of 2019 was like not a happy time. Our camp was relevant. I finally had a team, but 2019 was the first time I had to fire someone. 2019 was, I mean, dude, we septupled 7 times our team in 4 months. Can you, right? Like, just so much brokenness everywhere. And like, then you also had, so I'm trying to string together. I think I'm landing where you are in the ballpark, but yes, like we had a whole new crop of people come in. Jonathan, they were not even half of you. Seriously. Like we had some amazing people. Don't get me wrong, but I would be lying through my teeth if I said every single person who hired was a rock star, right? Like that. It's like Andrew and Zach made fun of some of the consultants we got on their own podcast. It was like, wow, that's pretty ballsy of you to do, but. Hey, right? Like now I kind of see it's like, oh, now that we've got the money, many of these individuals who are not motivated for the same reasons that you and I are suddenly here. And in terms of who to trust, God, like I will say this. I mean, there's so much. One of the things that made me lose my temper before multiple times. But here's like a statement that will, I hope, contextualize at least some portion of it. So imagine if you're a technologist, like I identified. I was rolling out all the technology on the campaign, so I was like CTO de facto in this. And you're like, okay, so I can't use best and great software because I have very specific political needs. Cool. And then right. And then I can't even use like the best like American political software for this because the country is so broken that you can't use the same technology. You have to use Democratic technology and Republican technology. Okay, fine. And then you have this thing where like, frankly, you have to have some degree of, stability in order to go work in politics. So this, just from a racial standpoint, I was first employee, and then the next 15 people were all white people of a certain background, perhaps, maybe. I've never spoken so racially before the campaign, but now I understand even why like other people use the word racial, because it's such a shorthand. You're like, like Jonathan, like you are Jewish. Back before I like understood the difference, right? No, like the Jewish experience in America and like the difference between WASP and all these things. It's like you have a much more similar experience to me, but now I understand why people say like, oh no, like this is what like white means, right? It like is a certain entitlement, it's a certain presumption of resources, a certain carelessness, or whatever have you. Like all these really human things got magnified when the stakes became bigger, when the money became bigger, when the timeline became more crunched, and then suddenly when we were like more of an attractive organization, right? Which is great because now we're relevant. But it has the cost of being relevant as well. You couldn't trust people as like the quality of a relationship that you and I can enjoy, though not having spent that much time objectively together, is because we were both attracted to something that had like no feasible,
return,
obvious feasibility at that point in time, right? And so again, like, I'll even flip this back to you just to see if I'm like landing with where I think your head is at. But imagine seeing the organization that you experienced and then having people who like relate to it and think about it and feel about it and frankly maybe don't care about it or like misuse it or mistreat it in a certain degree, and then also have like a certain cavalier attitude or like a certain pompousness of like, oh, we know how to do this, or like, oh, like you should be doing this, you shouldn't be doing it. Does that make any sense? Like to have so many opinions and to really have such a different relationship to this thing, frankly, that we built, or at least help build, that's like certainly a lot of the idea of it's always a people problem. It's always a people problem. From the, if I can just dive into this, because you mentioned it earlier when you said if a tree falls and no one's there to hear it, does it matter? I've gotten feedback from colleagues that my department functioned and felt like a very different department than many other departments did. We're much more kind of immigrant / diverse / had clearer structures, more rigorous communication. That all sounds like a brag, but you know what? Fuck it. Like I ran a good team. Like I had amazing people who I could trust to go do that, right? I didn't have to micromanage certain people emailing other people on the org. Like what the fuck? I would always say, I pay you too much money to micromanage you to that level. But that is truly how low the bar can be at times. I mean, management 101, so much of that is pulled from lived experience. And some people are like, oh, I would have loved to see more anecdotes. It's, we had a discussion where it's true. Like you can imagine, like, I hope some of that is you're like, wait a second, this is not that fictitious. Like I can see real organizations or real former bosses or real former organizations that have exhibited this level of like thoughtlessness or inefficacy or incompetence. All of which is to say, not to get into a dark point. I know we're at 3 hours and 3, so I definitely don't want to end there. The reason behind the expression of like, if a tree falls is towards the end of the campaign, certainly because of the situation we were in a variety of just like frankly overperforming on almost every conceivable measure. There was so much panic and uncertainty about what factors actually led to success. Yes, totally. And that uncertainty, or even just the disagreement of like what would cause what things to succeed in what ways. And, again, you're out of such a large organization, people, I know everyone's payroll off the top of my head when it was 6. I have no idea what it was for 250, right? Like you just have different ways of relating, and whatever have you. That one of the things I got very used to saying is that, like people give us money to win, not to try. And that is reflective of how I do my work. That is the expectation I hold other people to. If I may, some of Yang's best writings demonstrated this thought process that you said, that you were talking about punch and you were talking about clarity of thought. What's that? Okay, people don't know who we are. Okay, how do we get national attention?
Right.
What's that? Like, we need to demonstrate momentum. Let's throw these rallies. Like, even if your hypothesis is wrong, you define the endpoint that you need to get to, and then you have these theories you have a systematic way of trying to approach these things. And then when you're wrong, you move on. That's okay. But it's not this like gesture of like, we need to start doubting each other, or like certain like toxic mindsets or certain toxic behaviors, or again, it's probably already some of that is getting a little bit less constructive than I would like, but that is very real. Like, we were a real organization with all the real limitations of like real things, and that is ultimately the ultimate expression of what I mean when I say there's no extraordinary people. Like, I lost my temper with people. People lost their temper with me, and though we did such incredible things, certainly you just go online and you can Google and find all these ways that we fucked up. I'll just choose kind of one of my favorite ones to like keep it even constructive. Dude, I went to Iowa. Like, you went to Iowa and like set the base. And in terms of like finishing this, like, coming full circle, I then went to Iowa to caucus.
Yeah, we were there together, different cities. Yeah,
that's right. Jasper, Colfax County, and I was viable immediately. I have the photo, and I was one of 22, I believe, of like the 400 counties, or the 400 precinct captains that we participated in. And we went from 5% on first alignment to 1.5% on second alignment. This is all Washington Post. You go look at it. We were the single candidate to lose the most amount of alignment in one round. And I think to myself, I'm like, okay, we just spent millions of dollars on this field operation. We opened up operations in New Hampshire, Iowa, South Carolina, Nevada, and we freaking dropped the ball on preparing our precinct captains sufficiently with enough practice. Like, again, this is not our precinct captains can't make people. No, we had 5% alignment like right away. Now, is that 15% to be viable? No. So obviously still somewhat inconsequential. I get it. But we dropped from 5 to 1.5. The largest of any candidate. And to not believe that was us clearly not thinking through, wait a second, okay, to actually win, you need to have people who are really good at attracting the people who are our supporters and then retaining the people who are our supporters, whatever have you. Like, that is one of the most public examples I can give of things that we did not do well, that we dropped the ball on. And certainly, like any other real organization, you can imagine all the other examples behind it. So that, and then combined with the fact that politics is so image-based, right? It is so. Yang makes the example. He's like, if some CEO was like tweeting all the time, that'd be a horribly run business. But like for a politician, it's literally his job. It's true. That's probably also a big reason why I never did anything in terms of talking about the campaign, when it was actually my job to help run the campaign. To help run the campaign. But yeah, so it's I'll even close with one more anecdote. I definitely had to tell my friends at one point, like, hey, love your support of the campaign, love that you're into Yang. I am not a spokesperson for Yang. We need to keep the ratio of like Yang / politics related conversation to like friendship or whatever other conversation, like at a fixed ratio, like let's call like 1 to 4. Like for every 4 times you talk about something, let's have like 1 about Yang. And like that kind of balancing of mental things was very, very taxing. Very taxing. Sorry. That still makes sense towards the end?
Yes. And there's so many, it's so interesting because we exist, even though we have these like fundamental parallels and alignment, like I feel like we exist on these like, we're like flip side. There's like this like weird weird complementary, but
yes,
but in some tension, because I remember in our conversations throughout, like you're someone who like literally like I don't know reads a book a week and like journals, and like you have these things called like work and life, and you're like yes. I have friends and they're not like, and you draw these lines and you like think very like, and I'm someone who like my personal Instagram is my can't think. I'm like, I'm like,
sure.
I'm like, there's no like there's no lines to be drawn because someone will always break those walls. So why don't you start out and just like have everything be one, because that's just how the world is. It's not necessarily, there's no normative judgment. It's just like, you're just like kind of accepting that reality. But I know one of the things I can and want to and should be learning from you is like, I mean, I don't think I'll be journaling every day, but like at least like, in like small incremental ways, just having this like steadiness of like mind and like mindfulness, whatever, like meditate, these like things that let you have this like degree of, you exist somewhat independent from like the outcome of the thing. And like, again, these are healthy, objective things to do. But I felt like, again, in my role in the campaign and like where I was and the way my mind worked and like the value I could add, it was to always like to fundamentally reject that. It was to be like, no, if we're doing this, we have to win. Everything has to be on the line, like nothing like, and so to like take it again, not even a conscious choice, but just like perhaps, just given our sets of experiences and minds and what have you, and time and, and whatever. So many fucking things.
I'll say this, if I can just give this quick plug.
Yes, please.
Startup founders feel that way all the time, and most startups fail. So the brutal truth is that you can try as hard as you want. If the market does not want what you want, then you're going to go bankrupt and you're going to be useless. And so the reason, and that's like the brutal truth, right? If you started Juicero, I'm sorry, no one cared about your business. Right now, like, I'm sorry, if you're going to start a search engine in 2020, you are going to lose to Google, like search for search. And so that's extremely, like, I think you're right. And again, Jonathan, I'll say this, I couldn't applaud you any more for fucking running. Like when you called me, I hope if there's nothing, I think you've always received it this way, but like why I take your phone calls, especially the early day, and to see that all you've built in this time is because I couldn't respect any more what you're doing. It's funny, even when you were talking about like, oh, the level of institutional failure, like the experiences that you've had with the corruption so locally is insane. Like that wasn't my experience, right? Like we had an entire team do ballot access.
Right.
And
there are many stories there. I'm like about to start crying, but it's so funny you just mentioned that you had a whole team doing ballot access, because I have some insight for you there. Okay, so many things. What is most important? I think one thing that's important to share. Wow, that was such an interesting thing to hear.
It's all sincere, and you know that.
No, totally. But just even that particular point about like there was a team on ballot access and like and like yes, I think the thing that always we always go back to and always rings true is there is no one in the wings, and it ends up being reinforced and reconfirmed in the most painful, shocking, tragic, manipulative, gaslit, torturous ways. And it was super interesting. I'll like share two things because I think it's so important to your point, like shining a light on some of these things and like being truthful about them and not like bearing them with you is in the ballot access process for this race. So there's certain frankly, lawyers are in important entities that come up in the context of
your favorite group of entities.
But Muhan, again, going back to the reality of pandemic politics and the lives at stake, and what really goes on in determining who represents us. We were told point blank, if you, so the way it works in New York, like to get on the ballot, certain signature requirement, again, these are in-person things you sign. Like when we were getting Gang on the ballot, it was like, dead of winter, like totally pitch dark. And we're all standing, freezing our asses off, like in the middle of the street, trying to figure out like, okay, first we start in Battery Park City. Then we're like, oh my gosh, it's like too touristy. And then we're like, okay, wait, we have to get 20,000 signatures. This is to get Yang on the ballot. This is the end of December 2019. And we're like, okay, we don't have any guidelines. We have no idea how to do this. There's like 26 campaigns trying to get in the ballot. Then we're like, okay, you know what? We're going to set an event. We're going to go to the post office tomorrow. And then we're like, we go to the post office, 31st. We're like, fuck, no, it's like touristy, like not good, not good, not good. Then we go and we literally traverse, like Helen and I traverse literally from Midtown Post Office on the west side of the 10th district, because you have to get your delegate candidates on the ballot and the presidential candidate on the ballot. And you have to get, we got 40,000 signatures across the state of New York to get Andrew Yang on the ballot, which is, again, literally nothing ever stops, because this lawsuit is still about having his name on the fucking ballot. We start in Midtown. We're in the post office where we go to like the DMV, and you like start seeing like people from other campaigns, and you start hearing things come out of the woodwork. So how Bloomberg pays $10 per signature, what have you. Anyways, dead of winter, we're freezing. Literally, like my skin is peeling off because like you have to like you can't wear a glove when you're doing this because you have to hold a pen and it has to be legible. And there's all these fucking rules about how signatures get off the ballot. And anyways, we literally traverse, Helen and I. Muhan, there was no team to get Yang on the ballot. Helen and I traversed from 31st Street to like literally 96th Street on the west side of Manhattan to figure out that like we had to be in these high spots of like high traffic, high density of registered Democrats who are registered in the 10th district of New York. Now, this is again, if you like, just as in everything, we have to reverse engineer and figure out like how do people do this and like what like money buys you, because there's no money being put in the ballot access part. And it's like, you have connections with a co-op board, so you're able to stand in the lobby. Note this very carefully. If you have the capital or you're the incumbent, this is the difference. You have connections with the co-op board in the city and so forth. So you get to stand in the lobby. No, hold on. It's like -20, you're fucking freezing. No gloves. If you are a challenger, or if you don't have the capital, or you don't have the wherewithal, or what have you, they call the police on you, kick you out of the lobby, and make you stand outside the building because you're trespassing.
Wow.
Again, and see that the incumbent, or let's say like someone with more connections and capital, is standing inside the lobby, and like someone who lives in the building. Again, so
that's so raw.
We figure out we have to go stand on like 72nd Street, 86th Street, like in between the subways, like Trader Joe's, high density spots, like find these people, whatever. We get thousands of signatures. We like fall sick in between because like, yeah, no duh, you fucking fall sick in these times. And we like go to Iowa, we go to New Hampshire, come back to New York, and then Andrew drops out, and then it's time to do the same shit again to get me on the ballot in the same district. So we're experts now. We know how to get Yang on the ballot. Like we know how to do it again. And COVID is coming online. Andrew's dropping out. The ballot access window starting February 25th. COVID is coming online. Like the first publicly documented case happens on March 1st in New York. The public health commissioner, the mayor, the governor, all these people make statements about this. And again, on record, public record, I'm not revealing anything special. Health commissioner saying, again, go in the subways, go in the buses, go support our Chinese businesses, don't be racist, like go out, go forth, whatever. So this is all coming online. And so eventually the ballot access window, which is like a month in March, is cut short. And so there's like so much to this, but I wanted to share one component of this, which is part of the ballot access process is like challenging the petitions of other people, right? So, which means you go line by line by line, every single signature of the thousands of signatures, and you're like, was the date changed and not initialed? Are they registered a Democrat but not at this address? Were they, did they sign it this way, and so on and so forth? And we were told point blank that if we were to, so first of all, we know COVID is coming online. But we also know that, like, in order to get in the ballot, you have to go out in person to, like, get these signatures. And we also know that, despite all the requests, the governor and all the people, all the Democratic leadership in New York will not change these rules. It's just how it is. So within a week, like, again, Helen falls sick from COVID. Couple of weeks later, I do. But again, we were told, if we were to file an invalidating petition against one of the other people trying to run, it would involve 3 people in person from our campaign, 3 people in person from their campaign, 3 people in person, like, again, like 3 to 6 weeks out. So this is we're talking about, this could have been happening still now, this in-person process to go line by line. And so we're told, do you really want to be responsible for the death for a Board of Elections worker?
Veiled threat.
And some other context around this, again, this is just like in the same way that we have been reverse engineering and figuring out and unfolding presidential politics at the highest levels. And like, you know, Andrew gives us these insights into like, oh, it turns out that like that fight you heard on the debate stage was actually pre-planned with the network with a particular candidate. Like, oh, that's interesting to know. It's just good to know how it works. Mm-hmm. Good to know as well that I learned that there's these thing called vacancy committees. So on each of your ballot petitions, you know, to get on the ballot, to get these in-person signatures, you list a number of people who, like, according to the law, it's like, if you die, they get to appoint your replacement or replace you. So Andrew's like the top of my vacancy committee, right? Fine. I was like, great. You know, if you actually look at the history on this, again, all public record, the way for almost a past century, the, like, basically, you know, handful of people who represented the west side of Manhattan and South Brooklyn, in this particular case, like Wall Street, the financial, like this is like the world's like capital, right? Like has been decided by posthumously appointing the vacancy committee members on the predecessors' seats. And so that's why 1992 was, again, this like particularly like potent year, because that is how congressional federal representatives have been decided, at least in New York's 10th district. And again, like, this is just a small, tiny example of what we've been talking about and what tomorrow is going to be argued in the Second Circuit in the Court of Appeals, where the New York State Attorney General, the governor of New York, the Board of Elections Commissioner, the New York State Democratic Party, and everyone in between is going to argue to the court. Are you going to go die for Andrew Yang?
Jesus.
That's their media strategy. That's their legal strategy. That's their executive strategy. Not just this, but I mean, there's so much to this. It was also done on an expedited basis. And so these things can take years to litigate. But because, Muhan, the primary is in 6 weeks, people get to vote on June 23rd. Of course, it was already made safe by mail by a unilateral executive action by the governor. First, the governor said, no, we can't do this. It's beyond my authority. Then he did it. Same thing with changing the ballot access rules. Moreover, so it's made safe to vote by mail. Moreover, congressional and state elections are still happening on June 23rd. So regardless of whether the presidential happens. But again, the former CDC director said, if New York City had shut down 10 days sooner, this is all happening at the same time. 50 to 80% of deaths could have been avoided. And I mean, we're like in the midst of this, and this is like all happening at once by design. There's an expedited hearing a week out, literally tomorrow. We're like gathering evidence, like, you know, it's like, and again, frankly, all of this is just a distraction because it's meant to postpone, delay, bankrupt, and just like distract you, because there's an election in 6 weeks. By the way, Muhan, we launched our first Facebook ad this past Wednesday, and it's still under investigation. But immediately thereafter, I'm sure you may have seen the screenshots in emails I sent you. You can literally just Google on a computer my name, Jonathan Herzog. Go to the news tab, and you'll see it for yourself. There has been since Wednesday an indexing manipulation of Google News search results for Jonathan Herzog, Jeff Curzon, who's the attorney, and in some cases, Andrew Yang, where hundreds, thousands of articles. Again, if you Google my name on a computer, hit the news tab, disproportionately with death, murder, suicide, Russia, highly, highly, highly specific headlines such as man walks into dead mom's home, finds body in freezer, or shooting, suicide bombing, top NYC doctor commits suicide due to trauma by COVID, former Clinton Lewinsky scandal whistleblower dies, with the same false lead. Attorney Jeff Curzon representing Yang and congressional candidate Jonathan Herzog. Again, literally just Google it for yourself on a computer, hit the news tab. A deliberate disinformation campaign, all by local affiliates owned by Sinclair Broadcast Group, which if you don't have any context of, please do Google and learn about what Sinclair Broadcast Group is. But the short of it is they own 76% now of local news affiliates in the United States. And they're essentially like a Trump affiliated arm, or like at least aligned with. And if you look, again, you can just YouTube like Sinclair Broadcast Group, and John Oliver had a good expose on it. They have all their reporters like read the same line. Like, again, they control 76% of all local news organizations in the United States. And so this is how, when you Google news search on a computer, Jonathan Herzog, you'll see an article on the first page from August 2019, Alligator Eats Girl. This is a local news affiliate in Florida with the same false lead. Attorney Jeff Curzon representing Yang and congressional candidate Jonathan Herzog. Next article on the same page. Mexico man kills two men. Again, literally just Google news it on a computer. The point is, this stuff is very serious. And I know we have our own personal arcs and narratives and connections to this fascinating world that we've been kind of thrust into. And this is very serious. This is ongoing. This is, as Nancy Pelosi herself once said, power is never given; it's always taken.
Amen.
And I'll quote you as well, where you say, you agree with many before you that the arc of history is long, and it may bend towards justice, but only if we make it so. There's no natural order. There's no inevitability. There's no teleology. There is no one in the fucking wings. No. If you ever needed any more confirmation, you have now heard from the first hire on Andrew Yang's 2020 presidential campaign to confirm with you just that. So I have concluding and parting thoughts and asks of people, but I want to let you kind of respond to this or provide your own conclusions and reflections for people tuning in.
Jonathan, I've been so grateful to have this as an excuse to connect more and hear more about your experience, because much of this was new knowledge to me. And what I'll say is that at the end of the campaign, you did have what I joke very darkly about as different strains of idealism. And so what that meant for me was, at the end of the campaign, in many ways, I was out of fucks to give. I was like, dude, I just spent 3 years, a campaign that lasts 8 months is considered long. I just spent 3 years on the campaign. We made the case to Americans that we wanted to give them $1,000 a month. And Iowans were like, nah, B, I'm cool. I'm kind of out of fucks to give. And that's why I respect and love and support people like you who run. And probably also why I also own that I'm a non-contributor right now. It's this system, and this is frankly also why I'm so glad you shared that. And offline, if ever I can be more of a resource, I'd love to support more too. But that's why founder psychology, so much as candidate psychology, is the great unknown. It's the great variable, because nothing's going to break you except for you giving up. But the problem is, you never know what is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And you're just going to have this battle from all sides. And so I suppose I unfortunately don't have much uplift there. But one of the things certainly that, this sounds cheesy, but early on in the campaign when we were talking with Yang, or I was working with Yang and we were talking about donations, we were talking about fundraising. I truly, in my day-to-day habit, I've tried to make it a habit, a reaction, that if anyone I know, no matter how weak or tired it is, asks me for like a reasonable amount of money, I don't even care what they're asking for money for. $5, $10, like take my money and then go. Because God, the people who gave us like those 5, 10, 15, it's whatever that person has to give at that point. They don't realize how disproportionately encouraging that like vote of confidence, that vote of support is when you're fighting against a system. Because otherwise, like every single, like it's the lack of oxygen that kills candidates and hope more than anything, right? It's always dying with a whimper. So certainly, like one takeaway for me is like support means nothing. It doesn't mean anything unless you're giving your time or your dollars, ideally both. But that I had not known this like specific incarnation of the darkness that you were talking about. But unfortunately, it's not particularly surprising. It is surprising to hear it's so grotesque and so explicit. It's such like frankly, it's like what you said, someone that you love and care for. And I can't say that, at least at present. I'm sure in the long arc, I would like to do something pro-supportive and, for the betterment of humanity, whatever that means. But yeah, the human costs are very real, and you now know that better than the vast majority who worked on the campaign. But certainly you have someone who's very sympathetic to it.
I have to say one thing that's been, I tend to be like, I can, depending on my environment, I like can, sort of isms of others can like seep into my being. And I think one thing that certainly has is like the like Yang chuckle.
Yep.
Which I think is like, can be salutary, but like can have its own cost. Yeah. I think so two things I'll say. One, and I'll do this shameless plug for him. Again, Muhan Zhang, you need to follow, subscribe, go to muhanzhang.com in the true spirit of the need to self-promote and all the things that we have talked about, and the fundamental constant need to sell. You need to follow Muhan Zhang at muhanzhang.com. And I'll say this categorically and truthfully, he will be writing the seminal book about the campaign. And not to, but he will be writing that book. And he has already shared his writing with us in a very poignant, thoughtful, articulate way. So when that book... I just got a secret note of something I have to make sure to plug. When that book is ready, you need to support it. You need to pre-order it. You need to, here's the thing, again, tying in so many of the motifs and realities of our time, we get to decide.
Yes.
Publishers, this, that, rah, none of it, we are our own, again, permissionless, infinite scalability, and internalize this truthfully. So when this book is ready, and even before then, support him in his writings, in his reflections, pre-order it, commit to supporting it, because there is no one in the wings. Sure. And I'll say for ourselves in a self-promotion way. The note I was passed was to mention that, again, in the context of COVID, that we actually haven't even fundraised. And so it's so interesting to your point about fundraising and the campaigns, but we haven't fundraised. I've been running for 10 months or something, apparently. I have never fundraised since before the first day. I have never fundraise, and we still haven't. And now, times are different. We have 6 weeks, and times are different. But I will say this as a self-promotion. I wrote this down because I can't forget to say it. Go to herzog2020.com, sign up to volunteer, join our distributed digital team that you can work from within your self-quarantine, within your silo, across the country. Donate $18 at herzog2020.com to put our Facebook ads in front of 2,000 more New Yorkers. It's $18 to put the ad in front of 2,000 more registered Democrats voting in the 10th district, who are all voting by mail. And also, if you can, max out and give $2,800 at herzog2020.com to help fund our legal effort to put a stop to the systematic disinformation campaign that is targeting me.
Herzog, can I plug one more thing?
Please.
I know we've had some offline discussion about this, but really just to drive it home, one of the biggest things I take away from the campaign, and you said it, there's no wings. Andrew Yang is frankly irrelevant. Like, he's going to go do his thing and he's going to be amazing. But this was never, like, truly, it was named UBI2020.org. For all the naivety of that belief, the goal is to realize that we have to be our own heroes. The goal is not to be saved by Andrew Yang. It is to become Andrew Yang. Just like Andrew had to become his own media, you have to start your own podcast. And that's terrifying, and that's not easy, but that's the takeaway that we're supposed to have. So very great, but couldn't agree with any more with everything that you said.
All right. Well, with that, this is just the beginning, but love you, man. Love you all. And let's really take this all to heart, digest it, process it, and act on it.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan, such a pleasure. And to everyone in the audience, thank you so much for your time and your attention. But it was fun, and I hope we do it again, Jonathan.
We will.
Sounds good. Have a good night.
You too.
If I could start with the daily update, there are 1,494 cases of coronavirus in Victoria. That is 7 more than yesterday. One of those 7 is connected to the Cedar Meats outbreak. 4 are connected to overseas travel. They are returned travellers, and 2 of those cases are still being investigated. We have, over these last 2 weeks, I want to start by saying how grateful and how impressed I am that 161,000 Victorians have come forward to get tested. It is a mighty effort, and I'm so grateful that we asked people to do that, and they have absolutely come forward in record numbers. This is by far and away the biggest testing program that our state has ever seen, and it's one that gives us options that we will act on today, and I'll come to that in just a moment. But those 161,000 Victorians, thank you so much to the lab technicians, to the public health team who have been taking those tests, processing those tests. We now have 141,000 of those 161,000 tests processed, and we can say that there are 30 cases that we simply didn't know about before those tests were conducted. They're not connected to an outbreak, they're not connected to overseas travel. What that tells us is the virus is still with us. The virus is in the Victorian community, and it was the right thing to do to go and do that massive number of tests to confirm that, to basically show us that whilst the numbers are stable, there is a real need to be cautious. There is a need for us to take a small first step and all be vigilant in following a new set of rules. This is not over. I wish it were, but it is not over. And whilst we won't necessarily be doing 161,000 tests every fortnight, testing will be a feature of each day, each week, each month for the rest of 2020. So, what I want to do now is take you through the first lot of changes we will make to these rules. The first safe, cautious and appropriate step towards getting back to as normal a life, as normal a Victoria as we can hope for, until, of course, we get a vaccine for this virus. So, as you know, we have been asking Victorians to stay at home, and we've said there are 4 reasons to leave your home. We are adding a reason, we are adding a 5th reason, and we are changing one of those 4 reasons. Essentially, from 11:59pm tomorrow night, Victorians will be able to have 5 guests to their home. They should be family and friends. After all, they're the people that mean the most to us in each of our lives, and that's where it's really hurt, I think, people not being able to connect with the people that are most important to them. So from just before midnight tomorrow night until the end of May, this next period will expire just before midnight on the 31st of May, so about 3 weeks' time, you will be able to have 5 family and friends come to your home. The reason it's family and friends is twofold. It is the group that's most important to all of us, and secondly, if there are outbreaks, we need to participate in outdoor activities, sports activities, recreational activities, whether it be hiking, fishing, playing golf, going for a walk, kicking a footy. No more than 10, and there'll be obviously physical distancing and hygiene arrangements, common sense basically. The rules that have been in place to this point remain in place. There are some further changes to funerals, to weddings, to auction houses, to real estate auctions, to religious observance, small private prayer, other similar services. Not a full mass, not a full service, but some very discreet, we think, appropriate changes made there. There are some changes also to the way a number of community facilities work. For instance, some counselling services which we believe are really very important. Some council facilities, community centres and the like run things like Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, things of that nature, counselling and other really integral and important community meetings. They will be allowed, but again, no more than 10, and there will be physical distancing and all of those other usual arrangements. Nothing changes there. You've got a list that takes you through all of those changes, but the headline is you should still stay at home unless you are going out for one of those 5 reasons. The 4 everyone knows about. The 5th reason is to visit family and friends, but no more than 5 visitors can go to somebody else's home. On work, I would ask and encourage people, if you can work from home, you must work from home for the rest of May. Some people have not been able to do that, but a very large number of Victorians have been able to do that. I'd also say, whilst it is now allowed, or from midnight tomorrow night it will be allowed for you to go and have dinner or a visit with family and friends, that doesn't mean, and it is not an invitation, to be having a dinner party at every house every night. We have to use our common sense. We have to be proportionate. We have to recognise that this is far from over. This is an opportunity for a first step that is safe, cautious and appropriate. And that's what's most important. Now, just finally, before I ask Jenny to add to my comments, and then we'll take any questions you have, all 3 of us are happy to answer any questions that you have. I want to speak a little bit for a moment about schools. We have been doing a power of work, and we're very close to finalising a plan to see face-to-face learning return before the end of Term 2. As you know, we had, for the purposes of certainty, said to parents right across the state that they should plan and assume that learning from home would continue for the entirety of Term 2. We now believe that a gradual, staged return to face-to-face learning is safe, cautious and appropriate given the testing we've done and the circumstances we face. Today's not the day to announce the details of that. I don't want to make announcements and then not be able to answer all the questions that you rightly will put to me, but that'll be done soon. And we'll give parents lots of notice. That's exactly what they have asked for. We've been working very closely with teachers and staff, with principals, with parent community, right across the board. And we're very close to be able to make some significant announcements on schools. Overall, you only get one chance to take this first step and to do it properly. This is safe, this is cautious, this is appropriate. We're not other states. We face our own unique challenges, and we need to be appropriate to those. We need to be cautious. I think it is also worth mentioning, before I throw to Jenny, that professional sport, after all, it is a workplace. There have been there's been a lot of work between, say, the AFL and the public health team, and we will be able to. We have agreed to a set of arrangements that will allow training for AFL, for rugby league, for other professional sports to resume from just before midnight tomorrow night. Of course, with that happening, once training is up and running again, that paves the way for the AFL and other codes to make announcements. So training resuming paves the way for footy to be back, and I think we all want that, provided it's safe, appropriate, and can be done in a cautious way, and I'm confident that it can be. So these are small steps, significant steps though. You only get one chance to get this right. The last thing we want to do is follow the example that so many other countries have given us. If you relax too many rules too quickly, then we will find ourselves back here, and indeed worse. We will find ourselves in a lockdown even harder than the one that we are now coming out of. Our numbers, our performance is the envy of the world. We need to make sure that we jealously guard that we are cautious, that we are safe, that we are appropriate in any easing. Of course, June, following more testing, following the experience of these 3.5 weeks, that will guide us, and we'll have more to say at that time about cafes, restaurants, and a whole range of other issues. We've been guided by the data. I'm so impressed to think that so many Victorians have done the right thing, that so many Victorians came forward and got tested. We are in this together. We can all be proud of the results we have been able to produce, and we all need to have that shared commitment to keep following the rules so that we don't give back all the great progress that we have made. Thank you to every single Victorian, and now I'll ask Jenny to add to my comments.
Thank you, Premier, and good morning. I too want to take this opportunity to thank Victorians for coming forward and getting tested as part of the testing blitz. When we started the testing blitz, we aimed to analyse 100,000 Victorians' testing results. In fact, we smashed that. We have now analysed more than 140,000 testing samples, and as a result of that, we found 30 Victorians who were walking amongst us, potentially spreading the virus to others who tested positive. And I want to thank those individuals. I want to thank the 161,000 Victorians who came forward as part of the testing blitz, who have helped us to understand the level of transmission we have in the community. So those 30 individuals may have spread the virus to others. They're now required, of course, to self-isolate, as is always the case with positive cases. But it has told us one thing, and that is that this outbreak is not over. This pandemic is not over. What is going to be necessary is continued vigilance and continued surveillance. So today we are announcing a $20 million package of measures to enable further testing, contact tracing and responses to outbreaks to continue. And these are important preconditions that we have put in place to enable an easing of the restrictions to occur. We're going to continue to do as much testing as possible in the community. We have set ourselves a target of a further 50,000 tests for this week, and we are aiming to test another 150,000 Victorians by the end of May. That will mean that we can continue to monitor the situation and see whether we are able to do any further easing of restrictions into June. So we will continue to be testing and analysing that data for the rest of this year. We're also going to be doing more analysis of our sewage samples to make sure we are across whether we might have unknown outbreaks in different parts of the community right across Victoria. So that is part of that contact tracing process as well. And most importantly, we know that any easing of restrictions may well mean we will have further outbreaks. So we need to be able to respond to those outbreaks as quickly as possible. This is why a dedicated outbreak team is now going to be established in the public health team in the Department of Health and Human Services. As part of that, they will have rapid response squads that will go out and be able to address issues with business, with workplaces, with with schools, with health services and others as required. And they will also be doing risk assessments, working with high-risk industries, making sure they can give them proactive advice in a preventative sense to prevent outbreaks happening in the first place. The final part of today's announcement is of the $20 million, there is $8 million for more medical research. Now, we said right at the outset that this is a new virus that's been introduced to Australia that's come here from overseas. There's a lot about this virus that we still don't know, and we are learning more about it every day. So this $8 million funding that will go to our world-leading medical researchers in Victoria is designed for us to better understand how the virus is transmitted in the community, to understand whether it develops immunity in individuals, and that is still an issue that is open for debate in the scientific community, and also finally to understand whether this virus leads to long-term health consequences for individuals. So we will be supporting our medical researchers to help us to better understand this virus, and of course we have already provided funding to them to work on a potential vaccine as well as medical treatments for the virus as well. So this total package is going to be part of our continued efforts right throughout the year to do more testing, more contact tracing to respond to outbreaks as they occur, and we will continue to be vigilant. We ask the Victorian community also to be vigilant. If you have mild symptoms, those mild cold and flu type symptoms, please do not ignore that. We have picked up cases as part of those 30 individuals who had either no symptoms or very mild symptoms, and they tested positive. That meant that they could have passed on that virus to their family members, to their loved ones, and of course to the broader community as well. So it is important, if you are feeling unwell, that you get tested, come forward. We will continue with 5 metropolitan and 3 regional drive-through shopping centre testing clinics. We will continue also to move those mobile testing clinics around to different parts of the state as required. So we encourage people to continue to be tested either through those mobile screening clinics or through a public health service screening clinic or through their GP. Please, we thank Victorians, of course, for stepping forward and being tested, but please come forward if you have any mild symptoms at all. This is how we are going to be able to accurately monitor the spread of this virus in our community. Thank you.
We're happy to take any questions you have.
How far can people travel to go to one of these gatherings?
So there's no overnight stay. So there's no camping, for instance. There's a number of national parks and state parks that will reopen as per the list we've given you. Not every one of those current experiences that have been closed can be reopened, and we're providing some further advice on that. Not every one of those can have the 1.5 metre distance. You can't socially distance in some of those areas, Buchan Caves, for instance, just to give you one example. We've never had limits on how far a person can travel. We've not closed our borders. We've not had internal borders, and we're not changing that. The fact, though, that people cannot stay overnight, I think will limit how far they travel. But if you want to drive to the beach to have a surf, or if you want to go and visit family and friends, then you are able to do that. Again, I'm just asking people to use common sense, good judgment. This is not an invitation to be out visiting family and friends every lunch and every dinner every day of May. That would not be smart. But we know and understand that in some ways, from a personal point of view, leaving some of the economic challenges and employment challenges, which are very significant, and we understand that. But on a very personal level, some of the things that have hurt most is the notion of not being able to connect with the people that are closest to us. That's why, logically, the first step, cautious, safe and appropriate to our circumstances, is to allow those groups of 5, up to 5, family and friends, to come to your home, to perhaps share a meal, to spend some time together. But again, if people use good judgment and common sense, that's an important step, but it's a cautious step. It is a first step. And if we see people continue to follow the rules, so stay at home unless you're going out for one of those 5 reasons. Work from home, all of those rules that we've now become well and truly accustomed to, if people keep following those rules, then just as we've had options to move to these changes today, we will have more and more options in June to open more of the economy, more of the Victorian community up, and take significant steps towards a COVID normal, something that approaches much, much closer to a normal Victoria than any of us have experienced for many weeks now.
So just to clarify that, you can't stay at the property, but can you book a hotel room nearby?
We would prefer, and I don't think you'll find, Airbnb will not be taking bookings. There will not be bookings at hotels and things of that nature. We don't think that is appropriate. If you need to go and visit family and friends, then you are able to do that. But we just ask people to use common sense and good judgment. Things like camping will not be allowed. And we just think that that is appropriate just for these 3 weeks. That may change in June. A number of different experiences that are not feasible now, we may find a way to be able to socially distance. There will be a gradual opening up of the economy, a gradual relaxation of these rules, but each step, and particularly the first step, has got to be cautious, safe and appropriate to the circumstances that we are dealing with, and they are different to other states.
3 weeks, you say 3 weeks.
Yes.
Anything move if the non-state or state go ahead to stage 2?
No, I think everyone can assume that these new rules, and this is a significant step. I'm sure that others would like us to go further. I'll just take you through the obvious example. If you think about cafes and restaurants, my thinking here is that if we wait these 3 weeks, when we move to go beyond just takeaway for cafes and restaurants, we might not have to stick with a number of 10. We might be able to go higher than that. I won't speculate on what that number is, but I think that the feedback from many, many businesses is that at just 10 patrons, it's really hard to be viable. If we just wait these 3 weeks, if we do the testing, if we have that further assurance that the significant steps we've taken today isn't causing us trouble that we can't manage, then I think we can take a bigger step potentially in June for cafes and restaurants and get them to a point where they are viable. Their business model has changed. I think takeaway will be a feature for a long time. If we can supplement that and complement that with table service as well at more than 10, then there's every chance that that's a more viable business model. That's our thinking. So it's 3 weeks. Assume that these rules don't change any time in the next 3 weeks, and we will have more to say in full detail once we get to the point where we have to make decisions for June.
Could that include pubs in June?
Well, there's been other states and a discussion at National Cabinet, and we're in communication with the AHA and with others. Certainly the food part of the pub, so the space in the hotel that's much more akin to a restaurant, that's certainly something that we're looking very closely at. But at just 10 patrons, the feedback has been pretty overwhelming that that's not a model that is viable. However, we might be able to get to a different model, a larger number of patrons in just 3 weeks' time. I'm not announcing that today. That's not a given, but that's certainly our logic, and that's what we'd like to get to. But that's based on testing, and to be honest, I just say to every Victorian, it's based on you. If you continue to follow the rules, then we'll have more options. If you continue to come forward and get tested, if you continue to wash your hands, cough into the crook of your arm, all of these simple things, if you continue to keep your distance, and if you stay at home if you've got any symptoms, then we'll have more options in June. And then as the year unfolds, there'll be more and more options for us to get to something approaching normal.
Will professional sports clubs be subject to this 10-person limit, or have you made an exception for them to allow full team training?
So what we've done is said that each sport, and obviously sports are different, will put in place their own plans, but they must be self-contained. So if they're using a training facility, an indoor gym for instance, or an outdoor area, it must be exclusively for them. We can't have a situation where there's a carve-out for professional sport because it's a workplace, because it's basically a job. We can't have a carve-out and then have other people who are not connected to that sport intermingling, if you like. This is about containment, it's about managing a risk, and in the event that there is positive tests, we're in a very strong position to be able to contact trace and take whatever appropriate public health measures are deemed so. So this is exclusively for those professional sports, and they need to have control of the space they're in, and they need to listen to the advice of the Chief Health Officer. There's been a very positive partnership, not just with footy, but with rugby league, with other codes, and I'm confident that they understand that there are risks and they need to do everything they can to mitigate those. And to the extent that they can't, the notion of having it exclusively for that team, for that code, protects the rest of us.
Some retail. I'm sorry, go on.
I was just going to ask about work. The Prime Minister made a point on Friday of saying that if it works for the employee and the employer, then people should start getting back to work, which obviously has a big economic impact. What's the thinking behind the stark difference, I guess, for Victoria?
Well, I'd say to you that there are many, many Victorians, their employers and workers, who have, because of the work they do, they have been able to work from home. And I don't want to see that change in the next 3 weeks. The fact that we're going to have literally hundreds of thousands of people visiting family and friends, that's a big step. That's a lot of movement that wasn't happening previously. We have to be very careful not to do too much too soon, because the problem then is it gets away from you. We've seen just how infectious this is, how rapidly it spreads, not just in our state and our nation. I'm sure people have seen reports about a single individual attending a number of bars in South Korea. There's now 1,300 people that are basically in home quarantine, and I think something like 2,100 bars that have been closed. This thing is highly infectious. It's rapid. It's dynamic. It gets away from you really quickly, and that's why we're taking... They're significant steps, but they're cautious, safe and appropriate to the circumstances that we face. They're different to what's happening in the Northern Territory, for instance, because they're in a different position to us. If you can work from home, you must work from home for the rest of May. Beyond that, I'd hope to be able to have a different message and move to a different set of circumstances for June. But again, cautious first steps, lots of testing over the rest of May. Hopefully Victorians, I'm confident, they keep doing the right thing, they keep following the rules, and then we'll have, again, more options in June to go even further.
Can community sport return to training?
Training, yes, subject to the 10-person rule, subject to things like, for instance, just common sense. If you are sharing equipment, you should try and minimise that. But if that's unavoidable, given the nature of the sport, then you should hand sanitise, clean the equipment, all of those quite logical things. And there's been advice there has and will continue to be. Part of the reason why we don't announce right now and have it all come into effect in an hour or so, part of the reason we have some time to work up to these new rules is to have all sorts of different discussions with different sporting bodies, different stakeholders, if you like, across the board. You can kick a footy in the park. There can't be more than 10 of you, and you should keep your distance, and it should be non-contact. And you should clean your hands when you start your kick-to-kick session. You should clean the ball and your hands at the end, and you should avoid touching your face. These are just common sense things.
Would a coach be allowed to pretend that as extra to the 10? You're talking about sometimes you've got some of these guidelines that people were facilitating.
No, I think 10 is 10. And at this stage, it's for 3 weeks. There might be a different arrangement. This is mainly about training and social activity. It's not about a return to a full, Auskick program. It's not amateur footy coming back at, pace. It's cautious. It is the appropriate step for us to take. But people want to go for a hike. They want to go fishing. They want to go out in a tinny. You just can't have 10 people in a boat that doesn't allow you to be 1.5 metres apart. You might be able to play a game of golf, but there won't be rakes in the bunkers, and people won't be milling around the clubhouse, and the clubhouse will in fact be shut. The list goes on and on. A lot of this is all driven by common sense. Logic is the best guide in these things, and if you're doubting whether you ought to be doing it, don't. That's the simple message. This is not an invitation to be out every hour of every day or to be having friends over every lunch and every dinner. That's not what this is about. And if we all did that, then we'll have less options in June, because our testing program, the biggest in the country, will find many, many more positives, because nothing will happen but spread the virus. Again, we're all in this together. If we all do the right thing, then we will all benefit from more options, more easing, further steps in June and indeed beyond June.
No, we give leeway to the governors. And these are governors.
As Donald Trump tries to get the American economy moving again, he faces an outbreak of COVID-19 on his own doorstep. 2 White House staffers have tested positive for the virus. The concern is they won't be the last. 3 senior task force figures have now put themselves in quarantine. Best known, Anthony Fauci, the man most Americans trust because of his simple and direct explanations of what's going on. The director of the Centre for Disease Control, Robert Redfield, and the head of the Food and Drug Administration, Stephen Hahn, are also impacted.
Yeah, no, that's right.
One of President Trump's top economists admits those in the White House are worried.
This is a very, very scary virus, you know, that people are going to go back to work and they're going to be worried about things. And it's going to take a while for things to get back to normal, absolutely.
This is a preview of what may lay ahead for many getting back to work. At this building site in Washington, D.C., there are now temperature checks, hand washing stations and more protective gear. But even that might not be enough to keep workers completely safe.
For the most part, we enforce social distancing, but as you can see, there's guys who cannot, per their job or per task. It's just not possible 100% of the time.
One top health expert says there has to be a nationwide plan. It's the only way to get the economy up and running again.
We can't stay locked down for 18 months. But at the same time, when you have cases increasing, deaths increasing, healthcare workers without adequate protective equipment, and we're suddenly going back to what was once our normal lives, that's not a safe place to be.
As states ease restrictions, some are facing a surge in cases. A stark reminder, moving around creates greater risk.
The other thing that we're seeing in some states is which is why we like to revise the forecast on a very regular basis, is that we're just seeing more cases and deaths than expected in certain places.
Donald Trump sees a strong economy as the key to his re-election, but a quieter West Wing at the White House will serve as a reminder this week. He still has a long way to go. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Rina Shah is a political advisor, conservative commentator and chief executive of Loom Global Partners. Joins me now via Skype from Washington, D.C. Good to have you with us on the programme again, Rina. A valet, a press secretary, 3 senior medical advisors to the White House in isolation or quarantined, and the president thinks that it's all good. What's the message to the people of America then at the moment?
Well, the message is that the White House certainly has no clue what it's doing. And I think it's a testament, frankly, to the fact that the White House has not known what kind of waters it's in. And frankly, it is uncharted territory. So there's a bit of, leeway the American people have given the president just by virtue of the fact that there's so much unknown. But this is very clear that the virus has made its way into the House. Where was the problem? What led to this? And it's, again, very clear that this was something that resulted because of a lack of leadership.
In terms of the fact that there is a debate about opening up America, you both already heard my colleague Alan Fisher's report just a moment there, and it's business as usual as the president would like it. There is, and has been for the past few weeks, this pushback by governors. Is it a delicate balancing act right now, or is it a very clear-cut case when you still have the public, some of the public, saying we want our rights to move around freely?
Well, that lack of leadership I talk about is not purely an assault on the president. It actually includes a great many of the governors as well. And as many of the viewers are familiar, the states complicate so much because in our system, what we really essentially should have done, I believe, is said nationwide, let's have a lockdown. President Trump chose to say, hey, governors, heads of your states, you make the decisions. You either want to call these shutdowns, these stay-at-home orders, or you want to say move about freely. So what it's resulted in is people being very confused, and that lack of leadership coupled with a lack of comprehensive testing strategy, a failure to really essentially shut down disinformation that's spreading at great high rates right now on our social media channels and across the world. I know that's a problem, but here in the States, it's genuinely complicated the case for a great many Democrat governors who've suffered the wrath of the president simply because they've criticized him publicly. So it's become a political problem as well.
How much of a political problem is it to have 3 senior medical advisors in the White House all self-isolating or withdrawing themselves, you might say, from public life for at least a fortnight or 7 days while they try and sort themselves out? Because the public psyche at the moment in America is we are being advised by our politicians to go back out, to venture back out, either for work or play. And there's a big question mark over whether the public might want to do that regarding their own safety.
Well, I should mention that there's no real reliable polling we can look at right now on what percentage of the country wants to remain indoors and the other one saying, okay, let's just go out there if some of my state is opening up, for example. We don't know that yet. It is certainly very troublesome that the same coronavirus task force that the president just a few days ago publicly let be known that he's thinking about disbanding. Some of those members are now self-quarantining. There's a number of us that thought that this would have happened a few weeks ago, actually. So frankly, it's a bit surprising it's happening right now. But it really, frankly, should come as no surprise because the White House has not taken the social distancing measures that the CDC has long been recommending. I'm talking months now. They have not taken those measures seriously, and to the point where the vice president does not even wear a mask when he goes to facilities that have aged people. So we should not be surprised, and we should expect that chaos will ensue in these next couple weeks probably as the White House struggles to find its footing because the messages right now, they're butting heads.
Indeed. Rina Shah, always good to get your opinion. Thanks very much for joining us from Washington, D.C.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Protesters are back atop the barricades on Baghdad's Republican Bridge, demanding the downfall of a government that has only been in power for 3 days. Mustafa al-Kadhimi was confirmed as Prime Minister last Thursday, nearly 6 months after anti-government demonstrations forced his predecessor, Adel Abdel Mahdi, to step down. But people here see Kadhimi not as a chance to start over, but as the continuation of a system that has failed them.
In the beginning, every prime minister makes concessions, but we don't know what the end result will be. We're not protesting against one person, we are protesting against all parties. All the parties inside parliament are still the same, so nothing will change.
Since March, Tahrir Square has been largely deserted after the government imposed a nationwide lockdown to contain the spread of coronavirus. The curfew has since been partly lifted. This is the largest demonstration here in Tahrir Square in 2 months. And even though the numbers are lower compared to last October, protesters today have managed to send a clear message that simply replacing the head of state is not enough to make the movement go away. On Saturday, the new prime minister announced a series of measures aimed at addressing the protesters' grievances. He formed a committee to bring those responsible for the killing of more than 600 protesters to account and ordered the release of those still in detention.
We also ordered the release of all detainees who participated in the demonstration, and we asked the High Judiciary Council to cooperate in releasing those who have been sentenced for simple crimes, except those who are involved in shedding Iraqi blood.
The Prime Minister also reinstated popular General Abdel Wahab al-Saadi at the helm of Iraq's counter-terrorism service. Saadi's decommissioning last year was blamed on cronyism and among the factors that sparked protests. But there is no quick fix for years of mismanagement, no easy way to restore the trust of many who say they have given up on the entire political establishment.
We are tired of hearing those promises. It's like they gave us a general anesthesia. But these protesters aren't the same. This time we're staying. How long have they been in power? 16 years? They didn't do anything for us. We will stay here until we have achieved our demands.
Those demands include jobs, better services, and an end to corruption. Even with the best of intentions, they'll take years to fulfill. And few here believe that Iraq's new prime minister can serve the people more than the political interests which brought him to power. Simona Foltin, Al Jazeera, Baghdad.